Hello, I'm Kathleen Meryck, and this is the second part of my story where I share with you my reflections about the whole cancer process and the approach I took. It's said 1 in 2 of us will receive a cancer diagnosis at some point. How do you deal with such news, with all it entails, and the reality you face in the coming days? Whether the diagnosis comes out of the blue or you suspect you have cancer and have prepared yourself, when you hear those words, it will be a blow you are not prepared for. Shock, disbelief, brain freeze, panic, unable to take in what's being said. Sadness, anger, fear. A whole cocktail of emotions will kick in. Allow yourself to feel that. Give yourself the time to process it. Illness can be very disempowering, cancer particularly so. It's a frightening disease that most people associate with death and dying. When other emotions are added into the mix, for example, fear of the treatment and its physical effects, anxiety about finances or being a burden, guilt about the effect on our loved ones, we end up with a massive cocktail of negative emotions disrupting the balance of the body. As a first step, I gave myself permission to not rush into decisions, agreeing to recommendations, until I'd had time to take it all in and formulate any questions I had. So any decision I did make was as informed as it could be. With the first cancer, the bladder, as I'd been there before, I was calm and felt I could manage it. But when just the possibility, let alone the reality, of 2 more cancers came up, I knew the cancer aspect was outside my control and could completely overwhelm me, unless I had something I could hold on to have some control over that would center me in some way. We're all different and deal with things differently. But I believe one way to help ourselves is to get to know ourselves better, what we think, believe, feel, and ask ourselves questions. For example, what is the right way forward for me? Do I want the full, unvarnished truth so I can make my decisions based on that, or prefer not to know the full picture? What do I believe about cancer, and does that belief serve me well? Who do I want to know about this? The world and his wife, or a small select group? If the latter, know your reasons why as part of knowing what is the right way forward for you. The question I asked myself was, how am I going to play this? And the thoughts, feelings, beliefs emerged from that. It's so easy for all this to run away with you. Or you can choose to take some control. That is, you can decide how you are going to deal with it as your foundation and guide for whatever comes next. This is your cancer, your life. And as I found, some decisions ultimately only you can make. Having a base point that works for you means you have something to hold on to and come back to when the storm of cancer is overwhelming and hard to navigate. Combining my knowledge as a therapist, and maybe more so, my experience of having not one but 3 separate cancers all at the same time, for me, the first and most important aspect we can choose to control is our mindset. What you think and how you think. Because the attitude you choose to have will impact your experience of cancer and your outcome. Personally, I knew the doom and gloom mindset was only going to make me feel worse within myself. And it would create more stress that would release even more stress chemicals into my body, cortisol, adrenaline, making it harder for my body to heal and recover. So I chose to have the positive mindset of, I've got this. No poor me pity parties, no victim thinking, because that's disempowering. And I needed to be strong. So I would say, I've got this, as a mantra on the way to a surgery, or when I felt low. I'd also tap it in with an, even though I have X cancer, I've got this. I also decided my survival was non-negotiable. And as part of that, I believed in my core I would survive. And I reaffirmed and anchored that within me by also tapping in those words and beliefs. When the next shock, horror comes along, be that more bad news or the effects of treatment, and your mind and emotions spiral out of control, you can bring yourself back to the base center point you've established. And as we all know, we think far more rationally when we are calm and not being run by our emotions, which means we can make decisions that are not governed by fear, but that are right for us, where we are at this point in time. My experience of cancer in the way it manifested gave me new perspectives, a much greater and deeper understanding of so many things I'd previously thought and believed, not just cancer related. So let me share a couple of my cancer light bulbs that had a big impact on my mindset and approach, in the hope that, well, they may benefit you also. There's a language around cancer that's not applied to any other illnesses and diseases. Cancer is just a 6-letter word made up of 5 different letters, but it has the power to elicit a negative emotional response in the majority of people, whether they have or have had the disease or not. It's a highly emotive word that can be so terrifying for some people they won't use it. Instead, they refer to cancer as the big C, or say, I have a growth or tumor. As therapists, we know the importance of addressing the cancer language. So I asked myself, what do I hear or read? How does the language around cancer now apply to me personally? Sit with me. This turned out to be a big one for me, because I realized the common language around cancer doesn't sit well with me at all. We've all heard the words battle and fight in relation to cancer. For example, you can fight this after a long battle with, he bravely fought this for 2 years, but sadly lost the battle. To me, this implies that if you don't survive, you failed because you didn't fight battle hard enough. We don't need any blame or sense of guilt here. I thought more deeply about this, and my understanding was a huge light bulb moment, an epiphany. They are words of conflict. But this cancer was part of me. No blame or recriminations, but my body had created this disease as a response to an emotional state of dis-ease. And if I adopted this language, I'd be in conflict with myself. That is, one part radical self-care and the other part at war with myself. Hardly the right conditions to heal. My head and heart needed to be in alignment, not at war with one another, in order for me to create the conditions in which my body could come back into a state of homeostasis whereby it could heal itself. From this perspective, cancer is not my enemy. So I decided not to fight the cancers. And by that, I mean not thinking or using that language, nor subjecting myself to it from other sources. Instead, I decided to love the cancers away. Yes, love the cancers away. This created a huge shift in me. I'd never thought or heard of this before, but suddenly it made total sense and felt absolutely right for me. So to that end, I gave myself permission to do what felt right for me. I told literally 4 or 5 friends and no one else except on a need-to-know basis further down the line. The reason? I didn't want other people, however well-intentioned, using the cancer language that I didn't want used around me and behaving towards me any differently. I'm still me. I'm not my cancer, and I didn't want it to define me. I also felt guilty and found it most distressing that I was bringing this worrying news into the lives of people I cared about, spoiling their day, week. So I thought long and hard about each person and how I could best break the news to them in a way that wouldn't overwhelm them, in a way I thought they could handle. And truthfully, I had enough to deal with, and I didn't have the energy to cope with the feelings of people who didn't really know me, were not really part of my life. Until now, sharing this with you, for me, it was private and personal. And I didn't want to constantly have to explain it all with the complexities that come from 3 unrelated cancers all manifesting at once, when I was focusing on whatever needed to be managed at that time. To the people I did tell, I explained the language issue, and I decided not to fight, but love the cancer away, and asked them to support me by not using that language, and all agreed. When they did, inadvertently, it was a learning curve for them too, I kindly drew their attention to it and asked them to stop. If anyone persisted in speaking to me in a way that did not support me, I distanced or removed myself. This was radical self-care. Don't get me wrong. None of this means I didn't fight when necessary. I saved my fighting and battles to deal with the healthcare system and make it work for me and to get the best possible treatment for myself. This was during COVID, so there were more challenges than might otherwise have been the case. When needed, I went into action, battle, assertively, but always politely with humor and gratitude, chasing up non-action via any and all means, another part of radical self-care. I believe the complexities of cancer, wherever it may manifest in our body, means radical self-care is a necessity. It needs to become part of us. Contrary to the positives I'm focusing on and telling you about here, there were extremely hard and tough times. Days when I was in an endless black hole of physical and mental exhaustion, overwhelm, and pain. Many days and nights that were an exercise in endurance. On one particular day, the only way I could get through it was by telling myself that I only had to get through the next 5 minutes. And even that felt like too big an ask. When I achieved that, I'd say it again and again until somehow I endured it and rode it out, being gentle and kind to myself, 5 minutes at a time. Which leads me into sharing some other things I did that helped support me in loving the cancer away. Obviously, there's a great deal, too much to go into here, but I'll share some bedrock points. I came to realize there was another radical I needed to implement, and that was radical self-compassion. No matter how ill I was, how bad I felt, whatever I couldn't do, I practiced self-compassion as best I could. When that was hard, I applied kind sight and imagined the person I loved the most in the world going through this and what I would say to them. And then I said it to myself. And if I noticed I was mentally beating myself up, something I was good at, and we all do it without noticing, I'd shift my thinking actions to kindness and self-compassion. If you work in the psychological therapy and energy medicine worlds, loving ourselves or learning to love yourself are words you'll be familiar with. In EFT, we often finish our even though statement with, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. I was going to love the cancers away. Meditating on loving yourself, I thought, what does that really mean? I understood it intellectually as a concept, but how do you do that in a practical, active, but non-egotistical, full of yourself way? As time passed, I had my answer, another light bulb moment. I was able to see that through practicing radical self-care and radical self-compassion, I was actively loving myself. And as a result, I liked and loved myself more than I ever had before. A cancer blessing I wasn't expecting, but was most grateful to receive. And I was blessed that I had 2 energy therapies, 2 ways to use my healing hands to help myself, EFT and Reiki. Through them, I had some moments of glorious disbelief that were pure joy, which I'll share with you. As soon as I knew there was a possible problem with my lung, I laid my hands over it and gave it Reiki every night. You may recall the tumor was 50 millimeters, so automatic chemo afterwards. Histology showed that on removal, the tumor was 34 millimeters inside, and in size, I beg your pardon, and the chest lymph nodes were clear. So no chemo. I'd had no treatment of any kind for the lung prior to surgery because there was none. As I'd Reiki'd my lung nightly for hours, to me this is evidence that Reiki shrunk the tumour by 16 millimetres, taking me below the chemo threshold, which, along with the psychological root cause work I did on the analogies of the emotions and thoughts relating to lung cancer, that is, addressing the old emotional stuff I'd stored up and held within my lungs that had manifested as a tumour, stuff that that needed to be released in order for me to heal. When I was given the all clear and no chemo news, I sobbed with joy. This was one less grueling treatment my body would have to go through. For me, this was evidence we can heal beyond our understanding. And it gave me hope, spurred me to continue with my methods, lifted me up, and helped me through the next challenging 2 years. I then moved my Reiki hands to my breast, and over time, that tumour of 24 millimetres became hard to find even on ultrasound, so a tracker was fitted. The histology results showed the removed tumour was 10 millimetres in size. With the breast, I'm more than happy to concede that in part it may also have been due to the drug I was taking to stop the tumour growing that can sometimes shrink tumours, although my surgeon said it doesn't usually occur for 9 to 12 months, and scans were showing my tumour shrinking at 3 months with Reiki. And from how I felt physically, emotionally, before and after tapping, I know that EFT supported me enormously, especially after a surgery, when I would use it to clear the effects of how the body experiences surgery. For example, to clear trauma on a cellular level that stays there throughout the healing process and after, if it's not cleared. The fear of death the body may take on because its survival is threatened by the surgery. And emotions such as anger, sadness, betrayal, feeling that your body has let you down. And importantly, to clear the energy of anesthesia. As drugs leave an energy signature, and I had many surgeries, I do believe doing this EFT work to remove these effects helped my body to not only recover more quickly, but restored some strength that helped it withstand the next surgical onslaught. I also chose to listen to and trust my intuition, my gut instinct. Having EFT, Reiki, and other ways to calm myself and release the tumult of emotions gave me that quiet place to listen to my inner voice, my inner knowing, as to what instinctively was right for me. And with hindsight, it was astonishing how often it was spot on. And as I mentioned in part 1, practicing gratitude on a daily basis, being grateful, looking for, finding the gift, the joy, even in the darkest of days or circumstances, gave me a positive perspective. And last but not least, humour, however black at times, was life enhancing. Seeking and seeing the sometimes bizarre and ridiculous, laughing about it and sharing that laughter with my small circle provided pockets of joy, which I was grateful for. May I finish by saying thank you from the bottom of my heart to all my surgeons, doctors, specialist nurse practitioners, and other medics at King's College Hospital, London, and my lung surgeons at Guy's, for your wonderful care of me. Thank you also to Pat and her research team at EFTi International for giving me this opportunity to share the insights and gifts I found in my cancers. I must stress, these are just my views and some of the things I did. I'm not saying anyone else should do this, but even though I had 3 separate cancers all at the same time, 3 years on, and I am still alive. And as far as we know, cancer-free. So something in this approach acted as a huge support to the allopathic treatment. Until now, I had kept my cancer story private. From what my doctors have said, the situation I found myself in was somewhat unique, and the fact I'm still alive and doing well is extraordinary. From being private to now going public has been a big step. But if sharing my story will give hope and encouragement, new insight or a way forward to just one person, then I'm privileged to share some of my experience with you today. I do hope you will join us on Saturday, March the 18th, to learn more about the research that shows that EFTi can support cancer care. Thank you for listening, for giving me your valuable time and attention, and for allowing me to try and help someone else through their experience. Thank you.